All right, welcome. This is launching campaigns, companies, careers. It's marketing ROI. It's how to set Pardot up to show me the money. That would have been a cool theme, but we're going to do the theme of rockets. So welcome. I am Mission Control for you here today. We're going to get started. This is going to be an interactive webinar. If you're not here in person, you're listening to the recording, you will have a fraction of the fun that we're about to have here. Because this, if you don't know, we talked earlier, all of the people attending, we talked earlier, it's going to be the most engaging, interactive webinar you've ever seen. So welcome. I'm Mission Control for today. And if you haven't met me yet, I gotta update that number 9. So 3 numbers introduce you to me by, and the first number is number 9, which I need to update to number 10. And I've crossed my birthday now for years working with Pardot. So I've been working with Pardot. Oh, and thank you, Alex. Alex says my Photoshop is on point. Yes, it is, sir. Look at that spacesuit connecting right on there. So 10 years of working with Pardot. It's been an absolute blessing. I'm very grateful. And the other number in there, 2200, which now needs to become 2300 as of recently, is the number of Pardot implementations we've done at Treasure Impact. So if you don't know who we are, if you haven't worked with us yet, we eat, sleep, breathe, dream Pardot all day long. And the other reason I bring this number up is because all the experiences, all the lessons learned, I've used it personally, and we've helped a lot of people use it. We've also had a chance to see people use it right, use it wrong, and can give you all that information. It's all for you. Final number, 32. Any guesses on that? Thanks, Jay. Happy 4th to you as well. Any guesses on what number 32 stands for? I'm actually going to need some guesses in the chat menu, and that'll give me a chance to sip my tea. Any guesses? What does 32 stand for? Times in space. Love it. No, actually, it is, and it's also not my age. Sometimes people say the age thing, right? But I didn't get that today. That is the number of skydives that I've done. So almost times in space, Jay. Almost. I love skydiving as well. So happy to chat about that as much as I'm happy to chat about Pardot. So let's get into it today. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. And in case you're not sure if you should still be here in the next hour, let me convince you otherwise. So we're going to cover a bunch of things. First of all, where does this fit in? The idea of getting ROI out of Pardot. It fits in very early. It's a foundational thing that you need to do. So we're going to talk about how it fits into the overall plan, a thing called the CSI. I'm going to share some stories. Hey, it's right before vacation. Let's have story time with Casey. But these are stories and experiences that you can learn things from. So you get to hear something cool and also maybe takeaways as well. Then we're going to dive into Pardot and talk about campaigns in Pardot. Pardot campaigns, talk about the different terminologies with that, and then it might be a brush up, it might be something you haven't seen before, but then guaranteed when we get to talking about connected campaigns, you want to stick around for that part because connected campaigns are here. They are not going away. There's a good part to them, but there's also a bad part to them. And you can be very easy to get connected confused is what I'm calling it. Connected confused. Kind of like being lost in space, you know, which way is down. You're one of those machines that kind of flips you all around. I haven't been in one of those, but it looks terrible. It looks terrifying. So it's like one of those things can happen if you don't do your connected campaigns properly. And guess what? Your button to add new campaigns goes away in Pardot. So when you make that switch, you got to do it right. And I got to tell you, there's some people that have done it wrong, and it's not your fault. No one told you. So we're going to talk to you about connected campaigns. Finally, we'll talk about multi-touch a little bit. Multi-touch is actually a different CSI webinar, all about multi-touch and advanced reporting, but we got to touch on it now because we're talking about ROI. Finally, some resources, and then T-0, we're like, get the hell out of here. Go have a great vacation. Go have a great weekend if you're going to take the whole time off. All right, let's launch into it. NASA, when they were launching and going to the moon, right, the big challenge, get to the moon. When they did that, they had this gigantic checklist, a gigantic process document that showed start here, then here, then here, right? You got to turn the rocket engines on, you got to light the engines, you got to release the clamps, you got to do this, got to do that, thousands of steps. But what I also liked about that is that they also created this picture. This picture, I didn't create it, they did. And I was thinking, well, they probably just created this nasty document, but no, they created a beautiful image describing that you got to do one thing first, then the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. There's a reason for this, is because you can imagine you're halfway to the moon, and well, instead of waiting for the moon, let's go ahead and get in the lander now and try to land. But you're in the middle of space. That's not going to work. Or let's go ahead and release the clamps before you turn the rocket engine on. The whole thing tips over and you've got a bad day, right? So there's an order to the chaos. I got to tell you, there's an order to the chaos with marketing automation as well. And it's taken 2,300 part-out implementations and projects and 10 years of working on it to see that there's a pattern. There's a pattern. So one of the things we created is called the CSI. Now, if you've already done a CSI with us, go ahead and throw your score in the chat. Throw the score in your chat, or if you're score shy, just say yes, you've done it, and then I'll keep going and I'll explain what it is for people. So the CSI is a maturity model, and it's an assessment built in together. So what it is it's a series of 10 steps, 10 strategies and tactics, 10 features you need to be using in Pardot. Now, they're not just willy-nilly, they're actually in order, just like NASA. It's do this first, and then this, and then this, and then this. And each one has a question. And the question asks you, hey, are you using this? Are you A/B testing? Are you nurturing people? Do you have landing pages to capture? Questions like that. And if you answer yes, you get a full point. You get 1 point. If you answer no, you get 0. And there's partials at 0.5. The outcome of doing this assessment with us, by the way, it's not online, it's not virtual. We get on a conversation. I'm happy to do it. Everyone on Chesh is trained to do it. But we do it's like a 30-minute conversation. And through these questions, we come to a number. And so one of the results you're going to have from doing the CSI with us, by the way, it's free, is that you'll know where you're at. And I think a lot of the problems, and I've had this problem too, I've got Pardot, and I'm thinking, I'm using a bunch of it, but I'm not really sure. I feel like there's a lot of things unused in Pardot. Well, you're probably right. You're probably right. But at least now you'll know there's a number. Like, oh, I'm a 3 out of 10 in Pardot. Geez. But at least you know you're a 3 out of 10. And the cool thing is it also shows you your very next step. And I got to tell you, the biggest challenge that happens with Pardot, with marketing automation, is not only the 10 things you can do. There's like 80,000 things you can do in Pardot. And you probably experienced this. You're like, well, I could do more landing pages. I could capture more people. Someone told me I had to set up connected campaigns, but I want to do some A/B testing because I heard about that. And then recently I read a blog article saying the 5 most unused features of marketing automation. And it's like, they're unused for a reason, right? So we can get distracted and we can kind of go after the wrong thing. So the good news is the CSI tells you do this first, then this, right? Then land on the moon, then get back home. It's in order. And the cool thing is when you do it that way, first of all, you get more things done because there's an order. And then second of all, when you do them in order, it's like a snowball effect. The work you do at the beginning ends up with you at the end. And in one example, trying to do multi-touch tracking when you don't have touches, that's not going to work. Or trying to do nurture campaigns, we don't really have anything to nurture them with. You don't have any content, you don't have any landing pages, nothing's happening, right? So there is a chicken and an egg thing going on here, and there's a definite order. So that's all to it. I'll show you a picture of it at the end. And all you have to do to do a CSI is type in CSI or send me a note with CSI, and we'll get it scheduled. It's a really cool time. We get to kind of talk about strategy. So CSI number 2. Think of that whole progression from 0 to 10. There's 10 steps to do with marketing automation. The second step, and the point of this webinar, is first touch ROI reporting. And the question, if we're on the CSI call together, I would ask you the question, do you know where your revenue driving leads come from? I'm asking you that question right now. So go ahead in the chat or the Q&A box, whichever one's closer to you, go ahead and answer this question. You could say yes, you could say no, you can say kind of, maybe, or whatever else to your heart's content, but I got to get that feedback. Show me where you're at with that so I can see, okay, I see some yeses, I see some nos, half yes, totally get that, not quite sure. Well, hopefully by the end, you'll at least know if you're sure. Moving in the right direction, love that. Most of them, no. Good. This is all good data. So when I talk about the revenue driving leads, we're talking about, do we know where the leads that eventually buy come from? Their first source. And we're gonna hash this topic out, the idea of where you first met them, not the first campaign you sent to them or the first webinar they came to, but actually where you got them from. And so this is a critical factor. And what actually happens is when you get this nailed, you get to celebrate like mission control, going like, yeah, the nerdy people, the cool people, we're all celebrating together because you've got that first touch ROI. So that's what it's all about here today. And I got some stories to talk to you about, because when you actually address first touch reporting, it is literally like a rocket ship for every single one of your campaigns. You're going to get more efficient. You're going to know if it's working or not. Not just that you got more clicks or more opens or more views of the page, but you'll know that the leads you got from that page actually drove $450,000, right? You'll be able to see that at the end of this, or at least know how to get there to set it up in your system to see that. The companies also take off. And there's a story where a company I was at went from kind of a loser company to a real hero growth-based company because we shifted our marketing and we got this first touch ROI. And finally, my career actually took off in marketing. I was able to go from a marketing manager to a VP in just a short period of time. So we're going to talk through that as well. All right. Are you all ready for the blog battle? Do a little electric guitar. My kids can do that. They're a little bit better than I am at it. Electric guitar, blog battle. Who has a blog out there? Throw it in the chat menu. Do you have a blog? Do you have content? And have you been writing in it regularly? Do you have an audience for it? Go ahead and throw it in the chat menu. Do you have a blog? Do you have a blog? Do you like it? Okay, Mary has a blog. That's great. Blogs are great. You get content. Someone said no blog, but website with content. That's great. I love, as long as you've got content, that's good. Yes, we have a blog. Subscribe to the newsletter. It's more of an email blog kind of thing. Okay, great. Good. Thank you, by the way, for all of that. It gives me context so we can make this more fun and also really zero in on where you're at with this. So Treasure Impact and myself, I love content, right? Love content. I think there's some really good content out there, and I love creating it. So many moons ago, we actually had 2 blogs, Treasure Impact, and eventually 3, and then 2 again, all different kinds of blogs. But we had 2 particular blogs, and one of them was widely popular, hugely popular. You'll probably still hit it on SEO today. Amazing. And it would get something to the effect of 10,000 views a month, which for us is a lot, because there's only so many people that want to read blog posts about Pardot. If you do, then that's awesome. Come read the blog. So lots of traffic. And then there's this other blog that was kind of different kind of blog, and we didn't really invest much into it, but we wrote it ourselves, and it didn't get very much traffic. It was more consistent traffic. And you would kind of take a guess. You'd say, like, well, which blog was more valuable to the company? You'd probably guess blog A. And try to look at the top section if you can. Pretend like you can't see the bottom section. I could do effects, but those people that just like, no, give me the bottom section. You read. Go ahead. You read. So blog A was that insane visitor blog. It was a lot of fun, but we were investing money into it. We were actually paying money for it to be written, for people to write to it, to promote it, all the things, right? Roughly $2,000 a month. Now think of all these numbers relative to you. If you've got a $1 million a month visitor website, awesome. Add a couple zeros to my stats is likely what's happening. So blog A, we're investing highly into it. Lots of leads. Blog B, steady visitors. Weren't really spending anything on it. We were just writing it ourselves. And hundreds of leads or less, but consistently coming in. If you just looked at that without that first touch ROI, without being able to see not only where did I get them from, and also how much money did I get out the back end, if you don't see that full picture, you'd probably give all the credit in the world to blog A. You'd probably spend more on it. You'd probably double down, on that cost. You'd be none the wiser. That's where Pardot comes in. With Pardot, every campaign can have a separate tracking code. So what we did, we put one tracking code on blog A, a different tracking code on blog B. And then there was a different tracking code for our actual homepage or our website. So you can see you can do this with your own. If you have microsites, do this. If you have your blog on a separate domain, do this. Don't make it all the same tracking code. Separate them out. So when you do that, what do you get at the bottom in the results? What happened with blog A? Barely anything. Revenue was zero for a long time. Eventually, long tail, eventually things closing in, 2K. But we had been spending way more than 2K on the production of this thing, right? So that was kind of weird. What about blog B? It was consistently delivering not so many leads, but those leads were very, very regularly turning into opportunities. And those opportunities were closing. We were talking to the right people in blog B. And if you think about buyer personas, that's actually CSI number 1. So you do a lot of work to figure out who your buyers are. When you do that work, now you know who you should write your blog to. So had we done CSI number 1 first, we would know, oh, well, we should write our blog specifically to the audience that blog B was targeting. And we kind of learned this the backwards way. So that's why I'm telling you, so you don't have to necessarily repeat the mistake. But by tracking it though, we were able to see what was the case. We stopped putting so much attention to blog A, doubled down on blog B, and obviously things took off. So it's fantastic. Who has been to a Salesforce event? If you've been to Dreamforce, throw it in chat. If you've been to a world tour, throw it in chat. There are these new events called dreaming events. They're actually user-hosted events, user-run, volunteer-run events. If you've been to a dreaming, throw that in there. If you haven't, you should look for the local dreaming events. I was just in Sacramento recently, went to a dreaming event there. It was fantastic. There's one coming up in Chicago, another one in the Northeast. They're everywhere. Oh, Trailhead, nice. Nice. Texas Dreaming. Oh, you went there. Great. Susan from our team was there. Southeast Dreaming. Awesome. Oh, Southeast Dreaming was fantastic. I couldn't make that one, but it was fantastic. World Tour. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of events, right? And this guy looks like he's wearing the alien headset from one of the Salesforce events. Well, this ties into a story. There was a client that started working with us, and this all happened before they started working with us. So I'll just put that out there. So they do a lot of events. So the question now to you is, do you do a lot of events? How many events do you do in your marketing as a company? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. Do you do a little bit? Do you do a lot of events or not much at all? A lot. Okay, rarely. Okay, good. Several per month. That's a lot. So some people are doing a lot of events, some people are doing a little event. So the question then is, do you know if those events are working or not? And so we started working with a company where when they first came to us, they were doing 80 events a year. 80 events a year. And these are all like little ones. These are like send a booth, actually like not even FedEx. FedEx won't even take these large shipments, right? It's like it's a private shipper, ship the booth to the event. And you have to send sales and other people out to staff the event. You got to pay for the hotels and the travel and all that, and actually pay to be at the event. So all this investment for 80 events a year. The coordinator for that was just going crazy. But it was happening. They were executing on it. The challenge was they had zero idea which ones were working or not. They had some gut feelings. We all have gut feelings for sure. Some of them can be right, but you can't exactly ask for more budget on gut feelings. Not for long, at least, if you want to stay at a company for any period of time. They had no idea how many of those events were working. So literally, they felt hostage to them because some of them were actually working. How do they know this? Because they were getting new business from people at events, and they could ask them one-off, like, where are you coming from? And they were getting a little bit of that data, but overall, they had no idea. They just knew that they were doing events. That was their primary thing, and new business was coming in. It wasn't very good, but there was coming in. And so they're stuck. And this had happened year over year over year, and as they added new events, they kept having to do them every year. It was terrible. It was terrible. So one of the first things we did when we were working together, and by the way, if you're encountering this problem, we can work together. So you don't have to necessarily execute this on your own. We can work together. You can do it on your own. Whatever works, just do it. We implemented that first touch tracking, Pardot campaigns with this client. And what did they do? They got them all tagged. They started figuring out, they had it tied to Salesforce. So they could see, okay, we spent all this money on these shows individually, seeing which shows they were at. How did it progress? How are the leads doing? Were there any opportunities? And finally, how much business came out of them? So what do you suppose they found? Another question for the chat. What do you suppose they found when they did this ROI study, right? Little setup. How many shows out of the 80 were effective? How many shows of the 80 were actually driving revenue? We've got some really cynical people here. I love it. I love it. 12, 8, 3 out of 80? Terry, someone's getting fired at that point. Oh, that'd be terrible. 10, 5? Love it. 35. Alex, you're closest. It was 30. It was 30. So 30 events were actually driving revenue and were decent and were actually bringing things in. But that left 50 events that were complete garbage. And you know, I'll give you 2 events were good for branding or something and brand exposure, but you can't have 50. So they had 50 events they were sending people to, investing in the booth, the shipping, the staffing, sponsoring, all those things that were doing nothing for them. It's terrible, but at least they found that out. And it took several months to figure this out too, because they had to have the stats come in and their sales cycle was a certain period of time. But when it came in, they were slightly horrified, but then they were able to turn around by saying, look, we were not going to spend on these events anymore. And they took all that money. You can imagine how much money they had saved. And they like doubled down on the events that were working. So they elevated their sponsorships and they got more speaking opportunities there. And they took the rest of that and they did more PPC and other sources. And they hosted their own customer event with some of that money. Fantastic. But it all happened. That whole shift happened because they started tracking their campaigns not only as like a middle touch, but as a first touch. Like if I first found you from this area, that's what matters. Finally, I said campaigns, I said companies, career. I gotta tell you, like I'm just a marketer. I love marketing. I've been doing it for a while. And when I first bumped into Pardot, I had only been using Google Analytics, you know, trying to do the digital marketing thing, right? And you really try to hack Google Analytics. This is back in the day. So if you haven't experienced this is like me talking like I'm walking uphill both ways. And it kind of felt like that. And for anyone that was in those days, and if you can relate to that, go ahead and throw some commiseration into the chat. But we were just hacking Google Analytics, trying to get it to work. And Google never really wanted to let you know specifically who converted, right? They only wanted to tell you, 14 people out of your funnel of 80 converted. They never wanted to give you better data on that. It was more B2C type setup. And so you didn't really have an answer. And so when I came into this one company, it was really messed up. It was messed up. My marketing career was going nowhere. And then sure enough, I bumped into Pardot, marketing automation. And one of those things, they say capture, nurture, automate, but they don't talk about reporting. Holy crap. When I set up that first touch reporting, I was able to start showing ROI on our marketing dollars. Things changed in this company. At the very beginning, the CEO was like, just do this thing. I don't know if anyone can relate in the marketing world, being a cost center, or the way you'd probably describe it would be like, I'm the print shop for sales. Well, that happens, right? Marketing, if we're just like we spend money, right? We waste money on these events and we make collateral for sales. That's kind of like how it can be. But when you start showing ROI, now you become an investment, right? And so yeah, we can make this look pretty. Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, of course I can make your document look pretty, right? Yeah, exactly, right? You get a little Word doc. Yeah, can you make this look fancy? Exactly, Mary. So to go from being a print shop to being the investment, to get a seat at the table with the VP of sales and those kind of things, it all came from starting to show ROI. And so by simply saying, and there was one particular thing, there was like a Google account, we spent something like, I think it was $5,000 on it, and it brought in over $1 million from all the different leads. When I showed that to the CEO, his first reaction was what? Here's another 5. How many more 5s can I give you and still have the same results? And then you start sweating it like, I don't know if this lead source scales, but I'm really sure. Let's find out if it does. Either way, good problem to have. And then the final part that happened is when I did that, I very quickly went from being a marketing manager to being a VP of marketing with a technology company in something like 3 years. It's very short, maybe like 2.8 years. It's very quick. And just because every company I went to, I would show up, start doing ROI, and they'd say, okay, cool, this is working, this isn't. And it was much more black and white. And then they started giving me more money, and I started getting a real budget. It was great. So I love that all to happen for everyone here today as well. Okay, let's get technical, and then we will go from there to talk connected campaigns. All right, got a campaign? We've used this word a ton in marketing, haven't we? We've abused it. And like I say, in the Marine Corps, we used it to describe a hat. So just when you thought you had enough definitions of the word campaign, now you have more. So it was a hat in the Marine Corps, and in marketing, what does it tend to be? It tends to be a word to describe an effort, right? A collective effort, maybe multiple assets going into it. Oh, thanks, Alex. I'll do more karaoke in the Q&A. Appreciate it. Shout out. So in marketing, it's a collective effort, right? A landing page, an email goes out. It's all about this webinar. Like this webinar, I could say that this webinar is a campaign. Well, guess what? That's not what Pardot thinks of it. Pardot thinks of it as a first touch. A Pardot campaign is a first touch campaign. And we'll get to connected in a second, but you got to understand how they are individually first. A Pardot campaign addresses the problem of where did I get these revenue driving leads? CSI number 2, what we're talking about today. Pardot campaigns are going to do that for you. Salesforce campaigns, you can have many of them, and they're for multi-touch. And there's a point and a reason to that, but it's not the first thing you want to be addressing. So let's get deeper into this. So everyone gets a first touch Pardot campaign. It's kind of like Oprah, right? You get a first touch campaign. You get a first touch campaign. You get one. So even if you don't tag people properly, they're still going to get one in Pardot. It may tell you nothing, in which case you probably haven't looked at it. But the cool thing is you only get one, right? There's only one way you met that prospect at the very beginning, your earliest touch. And so in Pardot, everyone gets one. Now, oftentimes it kind of all goes into website tracking. That's usually the first one that happens. Website tracking, having all of your leads have website tracking as a first touch lead source is not a good thing. That's kind of the status quo when you first set up the system. But the goal is to start there, but eventually start individually tagging things, whether you're uploading them, whether they're clicking through from an ad, or they're clicking through from a campaign or whatever. Just start tagging them specifically with where you met them, their first touch. And you can do this in remarkably a lot different ways. So you can tag the URL. Pardot actually allows you to put a little parameter in the URL with the campaign number, so that even if they haven't completed a form, it's still going to cookie them with that campaign. Huge, right? This is great for when you have inbound links from paid advertisements, even inbound links from organic links on Twitter and other social media links. You can tag them so that people are none the wiser. They still get the same asset. You don't have to recreate anything, but they're tagged with that first touch campaign. It'll let you know, hey, keep going on social. You're doing a good job and you're bringing in some business, because not only will it tag that, but it'll follow them all the way through their entire lives in your CRM to let you know that that money you brought in, that close one deal, came all the way back from that tweet 7 months ago. It's amazing. Also, when you upload people, you can just specifically say this is their lead source, and you should. And the goal with all of this is that you need a process to start tagging people. Okay, right now everyone's in website tracking, but every event we do, for those of you doing a lot of events, every event we do, every URL we control, every ad we buy, let's go ahead and make sure that we tag it with that first touch campaign. Where did I first find you? Because that way you get this good information all the way through. Let's talk about what that looks like. This is the Pardot campaign report. So in Pardot, down here because I shrank the window, it just shows you a little graph, but that's for reporting. And when you first get to the campaign report, you see this chart, which was added a long time ago, before we were born, to compete with another app that had another chart that looked kind of like this. But it doesn't actually do too much, and that's okay, because the really good stuff is this thing down below. If you start here and you scroll down, campaign report, you get many, many rows of what you see right here. Many rows of this, if you've set it up right. If you haven't set it up yet, I get it. Hey, this is the webinar to be at if you haven't set it up right. then it's going to all be on website tracking usually, or maybe imported from Salesforce. But the goal eventually is to have some really good stuff showing up there. Let's describe what it is. Each row here is a different campaign, and each column, instead of thinking of just some column in a table, this is actually your funnel. This is your marketing funnel. It's crazy. So it's just kind of tipped sideways, right? So if I kind of like tip my laptop sideways and, oh, we're falling off the table, right? If I did that, this would be the funnel. So the visitors is at the top, right? That's the top. They're maybe not aware. You're kind of coming to your site. You don't know who they are yet, but as soon as they convert on a landing page, or they click on a link in an email or something, as soon as they convert and you know who they are, they become prospects. And I've gone down the funnel to prospects. Now let's say you're going to nurture them a bit and they're going to do a bunch of things. As soon as you've decided it's time for them to go into Salesforce to talk to a sales rep, the word in Pardot is assign. So they go from being a prospect to being assigned. So you see how this is the funnel just proceeding down. But what's really cool is it ties into Salesforce. So you get all those cool data points that you wouldn't normally know in the marketing side, because you get to see how many opportunities. Okay, I have all these visitors, prospects. I've assigned 130 of them to sales. Gives you a little math. You can actually put cost data in for your campaigns. If you didn't know that, try it out. It's magic. Suddenly you're a math whiz. All you had to do was put that initial campaign was 5K, right? If you bought a list, I know it's heresy, but if you bought a list and it was 10 grand, put 10 grand in there. You're going to see some things calculated out. It makes a lot of sense. Or if an event costs you roughly 60K, put that in there. These charts are really impressive, especially when you export them and show them to people in leadership, and show them to sales. If you are leadership, showing these charts to people shows you know what you're doing. You're no longer the print shop making things pretty. Now you're the investment. Like, you're the place to send the budget to. So this is a really cool chart. This is why it's my favorite report, because not only can you see how things are going overall, you can see in particular if something, let's say, came from AdWords. How is it proceeding? Is it going quicker or is it going slower? How is everyone stuck in the prospect world? Or have they not moved over? You can troubleshoot every single jump from one column to the next like it's your funnel, based on every single campaign. It's magic. And then notice at the end, how many opportunities did sales create in Salesforce? 38. Okay, it means we got to do some work on our criteria over here. We're sending them 100 things, or almost 100 things they're not using, they're leads they're not using. Okay, so now I know to focus on that in the next quarter. Then check this out. You actually see the value over here of how much those 38 opportunities are worth $356,000. So if it closes, if every one of those 38 closed, you get that much money. It's beautiful. And then finally, if it does close, it shows up in the revenue column. And this may or may not be winky face on your Pardot cert if you haven't already taken it. Know these columns, know thy columns. They may be on a cert exam. What can I say? But the revenues, that's my favorite column right there, because that tells you absolutely from all the visitors and the prospects you got from this campaign, however much you spent on it, you have literally closed $106,000 in deals, with the sales team. We're all one team, based on the leads from that source. Magic. You can't argue with it. There's no gray. It is a sweet, sweet thing. It sounds like a song. All right, ready to get connected? We got technical. Now we're gonna get connected, and we're gonna kill the connected confusion. Who out there? Because I think it's about time to ask another question. What do you think? Who out there has already set up connected campaigns? Or go ahead and tell me what your status is. Have you set it up? Have you not set it up? Have you heard of it? Have you not heard of it? Okay, we got someone who's all set up. Who else? Set up, great. All set up. Ooh, we got lots of setups here. Is anyone not set up? Okay, cool. So we got a good mixed crowd. Not set up, have not heard of it. Great. Hey, welcome. You're in the right spot. You are in the right spot. Not set up. Okay, good mix of people. So for those who are set up, definitely as we go through this, some of this may be like, oh yeah, I went through that, and hopefully it wasn't too traumatic for you. But also you'll have a chance to share some of your experiences. You can throw them in chat as we're going through to kind of help everyone else out. And for those of you who haven't set up, great. That's what we're going to talk about right now. And then for both of you, both groups, whether you've set it up or not, or even not heard of it, we're going to talk about the connected confusion that happens with people that have 100% set it up and are 99% using it incorrectly. So let's get to it. Connected campaigns, what are they? For those of you who said, I haven't heard of this thing. Well, no worries. It's newish. It's newish out. It's coming out from Pardot. Pardot's cranking stuff out now for their product development. And what it does is it resolves the fact that Salesforce has campaigns and Pardot has campaigns, and they are not the same thing. Pardot campaigns, like we were saying earlier, are these first touch. They should have called them sources, right? Like a Pardot first touch source or just Pardot source. In Pardot, there's actually a lead source field in there, which is kind of a duplicate with Pardot sources. So they're there. And then on the other side, Salesforce has the Salesforce source that for probably like a decade was completely useless. No one used it because it was only sales. But not until marketing started connecting our marketing automation into CRM did we start saying, hey, we do campaigns. How can we use those? So now they're coming back to life. Campaigns in Salesforce, you can have many of them. And the idea in the campaigns in Salesforce is that you tag someone in Salesforce with every single marketing and sales touch you ever did with a campaign. Now, within reason, because every time you do this, there's a little work involved. But the idea is you first met someone in Pardot through Dreamforce 2018. Great, met them there. Well, what did you do? Well, you followed up with some email, you nurtured them, your salesperson reached out. You have all these different touches. Maybe you invited them to a VIP dinner, if you're Treasure Impact. Casey might have invited you to go skydiving. By the way, who wants to go skydiving? Go ahead and put yes in there, and we'll connect up after this. Let me know if you want to go skydiving. We'll file it under the marketing expense. Oh, I got a raised hand. Excellent. We got some takers, Christina, so this will be fantastic. But I digress. You can be in all those different touches inside a Salesforce campaign. So it's kind of a cool thing because you can see, well, what contributed to this deal closing? Now, that's a good question to answer if you've already answered where they came from in the first place. So to resolve this sort of double use of the word campaign, then they created connected campaigns. And what it does is it actually ties your Pardot campaign specifically to a Salesforce campaign. You can still use, now when it's a Pardot campaign, you want to use it, make sure you use it as a first touch. And the confusion starts here. If it's a Salesforce, it's still connected, but in Salesforce campaigns, you want to start tagging things based on the efforts there and the different things they're participating in. So the fact that you're joining this webinar is great, but I didn't find you on this webinar, right? We didn't find each other through this way. Our source was something other than this webinar. So this webinar would be a great use of a Salesforce campaign. I digress. The benefits of all of this, the reason we should be doing all this work or tackling what's in the next couple slides, first of all, is less work duplicating, because in the past, what you'd do is you'd have Pardot campaigns, Salesforce campaigns, and not really talking to each other. And so you'd have a couple different kind of reports and you'd duplicate a lot. The other thing is you'd be looking at two different windows. You look at the Pardot window, okay, first touch source, well, what's influencing it? And you go look at the other report. So it kind of brings all that together. The other thing is, I'm gonna show you a picture of this. If you have B2B MA, and if anyone has that, go ahead and put a little B2B MA in your chat. It's freaking fantastic. It's actually coming built in now to the mid and higher tiers of Pardot. It's fantastic. If you've got these things set up properly, it magically works. If you don't, you see weird graphs, but they're very pretty weird graphs. So this is the underlying work you do to be able to unlock the campaign influence reporting in B2B MA. The other thing that happens though is when you set this thing up, when you go down the path, there is no going back, because the button that you might be used to inside of Pardot saying create new campaign, that disappears. That's gone. It's like bye. You then start creating campaigns. Once you've set this thing up, you then create them inside of Salesforce. So it's a different world, but let's go there. MA stands for Marketing Analytics too. Great question. And Terry, it scares me too. So do roller coasters. Let's do it. So connected campaigns, first timers, and those of you that have already set it up, which one of these options did you do? Did you do the Excel upload? Did you do the bulk connect? Or did you connect individually? Go ahead and share with us what you did, and we'll talk about what happens. So if you haven't set up connected campaigns yet, and you go to your campaign campaigns in Pardot, not the reports, but the actual campaigns under marketing, you're going to see this interface. It's going to say, okay, it's time to connect your campaigns. And yes, roller coasters do scare me, but skydiving not as much. Go figure. I know. We'll figure it out, Mary. We'll figure it out. So connected campaigns, what you're going to want to do is essentially all these methods, all they're doing is saying, here's a Pardot campaign. Here is the campaign it should match up to in Salesforce. Now, if they're named the same thing on both sides, that's easy. If you have cleaned up your campaigns in Pardot, and if you clean them up in Salesforce, that's easy. But there's some work you got to do behind the scenes to prepare. What I recommend is doing an Excel upload. Whether you even do that method or not, or bulk connect, I recommend you start by doing a spreadsheet, Excel, Google Sheets, with all your Pardot campaigns. And then clean that up. Get rid of the ones you're not using. Get rid of the ones that you used incorrectly. Use them as like an email folder or something. You want to clean that part up. You also want a tab in there for the Salesforce campaigns. Clean those up, because I got to tell you, usually, you'll see campaigns in there from 2011 and somebody that you weren't even there, and somebody created something. They're kind of messy. The mess will make it harder to connect these two. And then what you want to do is figure out, do I have them named? Really kind of start with Pardot. Do I have them named appropriately in Salesforce? If so, you can proceed down one of these paths. Otherwise, you got to get cranking. And this is what you're going to see. Every time you go to edit a campaign inside of Salesforce, inside of Pardot, you're going to see this right here. You're going to see, okay, it's kind of fuzzy. Either that's fuzzy or my eyes are fuzzy. But either way, we'll fix that later. You can see the name of the campaign and then the CRM campaign. So you can actually click on that, find it in the drop-down, and then you can link them together forever. Best practice, if you haven't already picked up on it, name them the exact same thing. Definitely name them the exact same thing. If you don't, you're going to be using way too many brain cells trying to map them together in this drop-down. And a drop-down is not an easy way to match it up. So when in doubt, make them the same name. So you see how there's a little prep, right? If they're not the same name, you should probably do that before you start trying to connect them. I know you can connect them even if they're not the same name, but I'd rather you change the name and get them all matched up and lined up, and then do that forevermore before you connect them, because then that'll just solve a lot of problems later on down the road. All right, how about some real talk on connected campaigns? Real talk. A little real talk, then we'll talk about the future, and we'll do some Q&A, and then you can just, start preparing for tomorrow. All right, and you can also ask questions. By the way, you can ask questions, the chat and the Q&A, whatever's good. So let's have some real talk on connected campaigns. Okay, this thing came out, and everyone is being urged to do it if you already have an existing account. If you don't, this comes turned on for a lot of people. And you're like, what? How do I do this? So it came out a little fast. There's not as much information about it, and the process can be a little dicey, right? So I think the deceiving part is the cleanup. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but for the most part, even before this, people were not using Pardot campaigns properly. Even though Pardot was enabling you to, people were, and it's okay if this was you ahead of time, a lot of marketers were using Pardot campaigns just to track an email they sent out. Okay, I'm going to send out the March email, so I'm going to make a March email Pardot campaign. But that's not the first touch source, and so it didn't really do anything for you. So if you ever felt that, I understand, is because that's not what it's for, and so it wouldn't really show you anything. You want it to only be tagged on the first touch source. Now, when that's done, it starts working, start getting first touch, that's great. Salesforce campaigns for the longest time haven't been useful, haven't been helpful. They've been siloed and not really connected to anything. But now that there's B2B Marketing MA, they're connected to Pardot, it's worth using them now. But they're probably a little messy. So don't underestimate the amount of cleanup that's going to happen, or that you should do before you connect these two things together. And the other thing to talk about is in Salesforce, you can have hierarchies of campaigns. In Pardot, the way we did hierarchies was by name. You could do it by tag, but what I would do, I would name something. So I'd say like events, and then like 2019, and I'd say Dreamforce, right? And if I had a subgroup for that, I'd name it something else. So that way I could always filter by saying events, or I could say events 2019, and Pardot would filter and show me those events, add up all the data, and show me the number I wanted to see. That's how you kind of had to hack it in part on. But now that we're tying to Salesforce, Salesforce campaigns actually have a hierarchy. You can have a parent campaign with children underneath it. You can have all sorts of family lineage, like you're looking at Ancestry.com on your Salesforce campaigns. Totally cool, because what it lets you do is get more organized about them. You can have a certain category, events, Dreamforce events, 2018, 2019, you can see trends, keep them organized. Very cool. Become your new best friend. Take the extra time to set up your Salesforce campaigns with that hierarchy, so they're not just floating out there in the ether, because then you're going to connect everything and it's going to be confused. So next thing is don't get connected confused. But we're going to talk about that next slide. Then lastly, everything now gets a campaign. So sources get a campaign, efforts get a campaign. That's really where the connected confusing comes from. You can get a little crazy trying to track all of this, in which case you track none of it or you get too much data. It doesn't make sense. So first and foremost, make sure you get that first touch source, and then you can start adding in the multi-touches, the efforts you're doing. Let's talk about connected confused. What is that? Sounds like a health problem. Well, what is it? Here's the challenge. So when I'm looking at people's accounts and we're talking in user groups about those who have set up connected campaigns, the problem with connected campaigns is that it doesn't resolve the fact that Salesforce campaigns are primarily used to touch multiple marketing efforts, and the Pardot campaign is only to track the first touch source. So just because they're connected doesn't mean that that's still the case. But now that they're connected, it's much easier to miss the fact that you still want to track first touch source. So people weren't using it before, and now it's even easier not to use it before because you want to track all these different touches, but then you miss the easiest one. The easiest one is the first touch source. And the difference is, you have a first touch source, you can definitively say, for the most part, I met this person as far as I can tell, I met them for the first time at Dreamforce 2018, then they purchased from us many months later for this amount. That investment at Dreamforce paid off in this amount. It's very much more black and white than a marketing effort where I say, well, they went to a webinar and then the sales talked to them. They received our pamphlet. Might have looked at it or not. I'm not sure, but these have all contributed. Contribution side, oh, there's the calendar. Contribution side is much more fuzzy and not nearly as black and white. So it's important then to make sure that we do first touch first. So before I beat this thing up, let's talk about it. First touch source, and it may sound basic, but please just go with me on this. If you can learn one thing from this whole webinar, it's that, yeah, you want to do connected campaigns, but make sure you have campaigns that address these things separately. Literally have a category of efforts and have a category of your first touches, because they don't blend. It's one of those ads. It doesn't blend. So first touch source, where you first met. Note it's not the first movie you saw. Like if we're talking about like dating, where did you first meet? Did you meet on eHarmony? Did you meet on Tinder? Did at the bar? Did your aunt introduce you? That's the first touch source. But it's not the fact that you went out to see that movie that night, what movie you went to. That movie is much more like the effort. The fact that you came to this webinar is like the movie, but where did we find each other? That's the first touch. A couple examples of that. The parent campaigns for that, events, PPC, social, the children of those campaigns, you'd actually want to tag you with it. Be your Dreamforce, you came from AdWords campaign, or you clicked on a link on Twitter. Note to self, email is not a first touch. How many times I'd be very rich and we would all be rich together because I would buy you all islands. If I had like $100 every time email was a source. It's not, because to email you, I have to know your email address. I didn't just magically make it up. I had to get it from somewhere. Maybe it was a list. It was a download from the sponsors, from the events. Maybe you filled out a form. Or maybe you gave it to a sales rep at a conference. But I didn't just magically invent your email, right? So email can't be a first touch source. It'd be an effort, not a source. All right, now that we've met, let's go on some dates. Marketing efforts. Movies and dates you had. That's what we're talking about. Looking back on your life. Oh, remember that time we went to Hawaii together? Yeah, it was a fantastic trip. Or, oh, remember that first date? Yeah, I was so nervous, right? Those are the marketing efforts. Those can be campaigns in Salesforce. Just remember, they're not your first touch campaign. Keep those things separate. Like there's a wall in between these two. It's good to know the marketing efforts, but make sure you have the first touch nailed first. Some examples of marketing efforts in campaign terminology: webinars, white papers, email campaigns if you need to. Um, Email campaigns, emails happen. I'm more interested in what did they inspire you to do. I sent you an email to come to this webinar. Awesome. The fact that the email went out, I don't really care. More importantly is the fact that we drove you to this webinar. Now, if we were having an issue getting people to the webinar, then we would start to micromanage all the different ways people came to the webinar. But that wasn't your first touch source. The fact that you attended this webinar is that marketing effort. So you actually, and you don't even know this, but you're all getting tagged here. So you're all getting tagged. If you're at this webinar, you're getting tagged with a Salesforce campaign on this webinar. We didn't acquire you here, we didn't meet you here, but you participated. Maybe that inspires you to work more with Cheshire Impact. And if you do, guess what? We actually can see that you attended this webinar, and because of this and several other things, and B2B marketing animation, B2B marketing analytics, we can see that that turned into business. Cool, right? Very cool stuff. And then also, it also shows us which webinars drive the most business too, which is very interesting for me to see. Whether I care about the subject or not, like this webinar did the best, right? So it's very interesting to see that data. But hey, right? Stop doing the ones that don't matter. Do the ones that do. Do the ones that your people actually want to see and that drive business. That's the whole point. Children example would be this ROI webinar. We have an email deliverability PDF we did on email regulations. You know, if you downloaded that or you filled out a landing page for that, we want to tag you with that campaign so we know if that contributed to you trusting us and wanting to learn more from us. Even if we sent you an email about a blog post, still email is great, but I love to track other things other than email. Email is almost like the wiring between the good stuff, right, as opposed to being the good stuff itself. I like to get juicier campaigns in this email. Finally, here's a graphic. Oh, it's fuzzy. But this is really B2B marketing analytics, where you can't see the words here. Maybe you can, but I can't very much. First touch campaigns with influence, showing, okay, what's driving the business. You also can do last touch. You can also do even touch. What I'm really important, what you really want to look at is that first touch, first part. You can actually drill down and see what's happening. The audio is getting a little garbled. Hopefully it's recovered. All right, and we're almost done here, so let's wrap it up. Thoughts on multi-touch reporting. How is the audio now? Can everyone hear me? Mission Control, can you hear me? A little bit better. Okay, great. Great. I'll have to send an email to SpaceX and have them check the wiring here. Okay, so we've been talking first touch a lot, beating it up. And the only reason I beat it up is because literally you can do what I did. Go from being a marketing manager, go from being a marketing coordinator, become the VP of marketing. Do that. Show ROI. That's what happens. And when you do that, the pressure is off you less to show those little touches. Sometimes I think the little touches are really to justify our job in marketing. Okay, well, you brought us a lead. Well, how did you help us with it? Well, I brought you the lead. I brought you the lead. That's what we do in marketing. We build pipeline. Now, did we help influence along the way? Great, but we're a team. I don't need to justify my career with it. I think sometimes we look too much to multi-touch, like what different touches did I do? Can I show that they help drive business more? And we do that before we do the first touch. When you do the first touch, multi is not nearly as important. Also, that remember that multi is gray. Yeah, I contributed to this and this and this and this. Very gray area. It's cool to see on a chart, but it's not nearly as black and white as that first touch. So first thing first, do first touch ROI first. Multi-touch is number 10 on our CSI. So after doing all these other steps on the Cheshire Success Index, number 10 is where we want you to start really hacking the multi-touches and trying to optimize that. So just keep that in mind. Finally, the first touch ROI is really where you're going to be justifying the spend, the investment that you're going to be doing. No longer the print shop, you no longer have hostages. You're not hostage to the meetings. And then finally, you need touches to track. How many times have I seen People that want to do the multi-touch tracking, they don't really have any touches. They have maybe one webinar, one white paper, one PDF. Okay, that's not enough to really get the value out of that multi-touch tracking. That's when you've got a lot of nurtures, you've got a lot of different content, different resources, different things going on. You want to know what's bubbling to the surface. That's where it really pays off. We're going to do a webinar on that too. This one, make sure we nail that first touch and get it connected. All right, before ending and getting into Q&A, quick heads up, Jennifer Snyder, if you don't already know her, she's fantastic. Did an episode with her on the Hardcore Marketing Show. If you haven't heard of that webinar, check it out, hardcoremarketing.com. It's just a webinar I do where I'm interviewing people on topics just like what we talked about today, people even way smarter than me. And so I talked with Jennifer, we talked multi-touch, we talked reporting, and a billion other things. It was episode number 42. So that's hardcore, and core spelled like Marine Corps. So check that out. There's also some great FAQs. Well, a decent FAQ on connected campaigns. You want to check that out on training resources. Finally, hit me up. Casey Chesh on Twitter, Casey@CheshireImpact.com. Feedback on this webinar, questions about connected campaigns. Just want to commiserate on how crazy it can be to clean up all your campaigns. I'm with you. Shoot me a note. And finally, here's a picture to remind you of that CSI. This is the path we're all on. You're on it too, whether you know it or not. This is where we're trying to get you. And if you're working with us as a client, these are the things in between, hey, getting out this email campaign or helping you troubleshoot this connection. We're trying to move you along this path. So there's a webinar on each and every one of these topics. And the only way you can find out where you're at on the CSI is ask for one and to get a CSI done. So all you got to do, if you're interested, just say CSI in the webinar chat. You don't even have to fill out a form, right? That's how cool it is. Just type in CSI in the webinar chat if you're interested in finding out what your score is, or raise your hand. Great job, Kristen. And we will actually schedule it for you. So this is another example of something you can do on your webinars. You don't necessarily have to make a form for everything. Make it easy for people. So all you have to do is type in CSI, or shoot me a note, shoot me an email, Casey@CheshireImpact.com. Say, hey, I'd like to find out what my score is. It takes about half an hour, and then after chatting it through, you'll know where you're at. All right. Thanks, everyone. T-0, liftoff, Cheshire Impact. I really want you to schedule CSI. And also note, people know this, we have workshops and actual templates for all these different things. So the Connected Campaign template, we also have workshops on it. And of course, check out the Hardcore Marketing Show. And we do Salesforce too. Not everyone knows that we do Salesforce. So thanks to SpaceX for all the gnarly graphics. Let's go ahead and stop recording and then get into some questions.